Something which is to be celebrated, I think, just as a sort of victory for common sense, Andy. Roald Dahl, his books are going to be printed now without really, really offensive words like fat.
Yes.
Included, you know.
So you're going to be able to still buy the classic edition, and you're also going to be able to buy the revised edition.
I mean...
so let's go through some of the specifics of what they've changed. So, for instance, Augustus Gloop, the famously fat... We're allowed to say fat here, aren't we, of course? Fat Augustus Gloop in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he's now described as enormous rather than fat. Now, I don't know, personally, when I feel a little bit fat, I say fat. I'd rather be called fat than enormous.
Yeah. Sounds worse, doesn't it?
Worse. Enormous, being called an enormous child is surely more offensive to parents than a fat child.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, the twits are described as beastly instead of ugly and beastly, and a character in James and the Giant Peach, there's quite a long poem which I won't go through, is described as thin. They're no longer described as thin. The thin has been removed. So no thin, no fat. No thin, no fat, no ugly.
So you can't describe body shape in the new...
No, but you can call them enormous.
You can, yeah. I mean, isn't it just crap?
There's also been, I mean, we were talking in the break about, you know, how the sort of the blind way of approaching kind of words in which the word black has been removed from, for example, describing the BFG's cloak. Yeah, so that, but you know, the important thing about children's literature, particularly Roald Dahl, is kids love nasty stuff. They love dark stuff. They love, you know, they don't like sort of sugar plum fairy stories.
But it's all, do you know what? It's always been that. I mean, just after I'd left school, primary school things, it was when the whole you can't say blackboard thing came in. It had to be a chalkboard. Well, I don't call this an ink sheet,
no.
Do I? So it's paper, and that board is... We say whiteboard, but then you can't see the blackboard. I mean, it's all just... This stuff like this, where it's just... It makes no sense.
And I don't think anyone's asking for it. I think that's the really important point.
Yeah.
I would really like Puffin to show its reasoning behind why it did this. Did it have 10,000 emails in saying, please, I cannot face reading my kid this book anymore?
Because it describes some James...
Yeah,
no,
they did not have that.
It's entirely performative. You know, no child is going to read a cloak described as black. No child of colour is going to read a cloak described as black and say they're saying that I'm a cloak or anything ridiculous.
No.
You can sort of understand at least some of the logic around removing fat, etc., but primary colours that describe a colour of that description is ridiculous.
And it's almost a bit as well, like, where is the line then? If you're going to take that stance on literature, I mean, I went to see To Kill a Mockingbird a few weeks ago, and there's some language in that would not be used today. But it's part of history, it's the literature of the time, and that's important to an audience.
To Kill a Mockingbird is an anti-racist piece of work, in the same way that Huckleberry Finn is, and if you take out that, you lose all the power of what those authors... And also, there's just a point here about artistic freedom. I mean, I know, you know, Roald Dahl's books aren't... It's not great art like you'd imagine, you know, a painting in a museum, but it is still a piece of artistic work which... You have no right to go in and censor, because it is what he intended, and it should remain as he intended.
And where do we stop with sizeism as well? Does the BFG now be described as the quite large friendly giant? Yes. I don't know what we do.
The unusually tall.
Yes.
The unusually tall, pally person.
Tall person, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.